Welcome to the first video in our series about the chemistry unit. For those that are unfamiliar, chemistry is the scientific study of matter as opposed to physics, which is the scientific study of energy. For those that don't have a good dictionary definition of the word matter, matter is simply everything in the universe that has mass, which means we can measure how heavy it is, and anything that takes up space, also known as volume. So as long as we can weigh whatever the substance is, and as long as whatever that substance takes up 3D space on Earth, that is within the domain of chemistry. Now, if we break down matter into more specific categories, all matter can be fundamentally broken down into two categories. The first of which being what we call pure substances. Now, if we're dealing with a substance that is pure, that means that this type of matter is only made of one type of matter, and we'll look at more specifically what this means. Now, the opposite of a pure substance is simply what we call a mixture, and if we are dealing with a pure substance that is made of only one type of matter, then logically a mixture is made of multiple different types of matter. Now, from there, we can break down pure substances and mixtures into more specific categories, of which there are four. Now, most people, whether they know anything about chemistry or not, when they think of a pure substance, are probably always going to think of substances that we call elements. So an element is the simplest form of matter that exists in chemistry, and the definition of an element is that they are pure substances that cannot be broken down into smaller substances, which means if you take an element and you try breaking it down, what you get is no longer a form of matter, but is something that we'll talk about in the next series of videos. So if we take a look at the examples of pure substances here, some students might recognize that this bright gold substance is indeed gold. Gold is an example of an element because if you break down a piece of gold, all you're going to get are more smaller pieces of gold. Some students will recognize that these nails are made of iron. This is another example of a pure substance. Now here, this is interesting because what you're looking at in these two pictures is actually the same element. A diamond is made of the same substance as the material that is found inside of your pencil, and that element is one of the most common elements on Earth, that being carbon. So all of these, gold, iron, and carbon, are all examples of elements. Now, if we take multiple elements and if we join them together in specific ways, you end up with a different kind of pure substance, which is what we call a compound. So probably the most important compound on Earth, and also the most common, is what happens when we combine H, which is the chemical symbol for hydrogen, an element, with O, which is the chemical symbol for oxygen, another element, and we get H2O, also known as water. So water is probably the easiest and most common example of a compound on Earth. Now, if we move away from pure substances and talk at mixtures, whenever you drop two different elements or compounds within a mixture together, there are one of two things that can happen. Number one, the two pure substances can mix together so that you cannot see one or the other. You only see a uniform mixture of the two, and this is what we call a solution. So solutions are examples of mixture where the two pure substances that are mixed together result in one being dissolved, or rather one, usually the liquid, dissolves the solid, causing the solid to disappear. So here we can see that this pure substance is a white powder. This could be sugar, which is a type of compound, or it could be salt, which is a different type of compound, and we see when the sugar or salt is added to water, it is dissolving because you can't see it anymore. Now, another more technical word for a solution is what we call, let me rewrite that here, is what we call a homogeneous mixture. Now, for anybody that knows their word origins, whenever you see the prefix homo or homo, this tells you that you're referring to two things that are the same. So a solution is called a homogeneous mixture because when you mix the solid and the liquid together, you only have one visible layer, also called one visible phase. In other words, the two pure substances look the same when they are mixed together. But this is not always true. For example, if we look in this glass of water here, we can see that there's clearly water up here, and someone has tried to mix sand, which is actually an example of a compound, at the bottom here, but no matter how much you shake this glass of water, you're not going to get the sand to dissolve, and therefore, instead of a solution, we have a mechanical mixture, which very simply is what happens when we mix multiple pure substances together and the pure substances do not mix together. Now, in the same way that homogeneous mixtures are simply another word for solutions because the two substances look the same, we can call a mechanical mixture a heterogeneous mixture. And for those of you that know your word origins, the prefix hetero is the opposite of homo because it means different. And we can tell that we have a heterogeneous mixture because we can see the water clearly forms one layer, and the sand, because sand has a higher density or is simply heavier, sinks to the bottom, does not mix with water, and forms a different layer. So here we can see that there are more than one layer, or using the more technical term, more than one phase. So this concludes our introduction to the different types of matter. Before you move on to the next topic, if you try the practice problems here, see if you can answer the multiple choice question and short answer questions, which basically go through, can you identify different types of matter as a pure substance, a mixture, an element, a compound, a solution, or a mechanical mixture. And when you complete that, you will be ready for a more in-depth exploration of what we will learn in the chemistry unit.